So this is Wednesday, September 25th, regular class, not advanced class. Make sure you're watching the right video so you don't get all confused. Like, I don't know that story. Book report is due a week from today. Tomorrow is going to be a work day where you get a chance to work on either reading stories for the quiz on Friday, or you get a chance to work on book report and stuff like that. And then it's the quiz on Friday. Shirt orders, if you've not turned one in, you can turn one in before first period tomorrow. And that's absolutely fine with me. And let's see, quiz on Friday, shirt orders, and that book report. Then cross-country spirit wear, that is coming up on... No, not spirit. Cross-country spirit day. Got my things combined in my head. On that one, that is today. But if you're at home and sick, you can't go to it anyway. And then I am officially out of suckers as of now. We won't have more until November or December when we have our next round as we go through. With our story about the necklace, let's see, so far we know who our main character is. And who's our main character? What kind of person is Matilda?
She's a brat.
All right. Let's go with this. Is she pretty or ugly?
Pretty.
She's pretty. Is she rich or poor?
She poor.
Is she good or bad?
Bad.
We'll go back. We'll find out more. That one just goes from. And what is it she dreams of?
Being rich.
And her husband tries to do a nice thing for her, as husbands do. And what nice thing does the husband try to do for her? So, and by the way, I just Googled old fancy ball dance, and that was like the picture that came up. And so it's kind of weird when you Google random phrases. So there's old fancy ball dance, and so they went to that one. But we find out, she throws a fit before she goes to it because she's upset about something. What makes her all upset?
Jewelry.
She has no dress to wear. She's like, how dare you make me go to a fancy place when I have no dress to wear? And she gets all barger. And he goes, well, I can hook you up because it turns out he has money saved up. You know how much money? I'm impressed. Was not required you to know that. I'm just impressed you remembered it. But what is it he was saving the money for? That's the part I asked you about. And so he's saving it up for the gun. He goes, but you know what? What I can do is instead, I can give you the money. She's like, all right, happy day. And she goes out and buys her fancy dress. And then everything is perfect and end of story. No. I agree. Because that would not be a fun story at all. Instead, we get to, the day before the actual party, and that's when it turns out she has another issue. And her issue is not the fact that she's sitting on the back of a thing instead of standing, thus making Mr. Brovicast have to yell at her. That's a whole different issue, because standing is not... And then not leaning also, if you're saying, there you go to the other side, that way. Nothing against you, it's just you're not creeping over poor false, and that way that makes things easier. I got your back. And so on that one, we have a new issue. And what is the new issue that pops up? No jewelry. She's like, I can't go there in a pretty dress with no jewels. They'll make fun of me. He's like, well, wear flowers. And she's like, what am I, a loser? She's like, I'm not going to wear flowers. So he comes up with another idea. And did we get to his other idea?
Yeah, we forgot her name, but
the forest.
There. Not the forest. Like, just pluck them off of trees. Those are acorns. And so the idea is instead go to her friend, Mrs. Forestier, who's like all richy rich. He's like, borrow one from her. She'll hook you up, and then everything's good. And she's like, yippee, skippy, giggle, giggle. Everything is great. She goes to her friend. That's where we left off. So now, we're on third column, and towards the bottom, and we're going to pick up and find out what exciting things happens from there, because we're getting to the part now, which is after the exposition. And what comes after exposition? So we're slowly getting into rising action. Giplet. Have we finished the story yet? Oh, so I can't tell you. You have to wait and find out. That's where reading comes in. Silly Jeff West. Alright, so then part down, she uttered a cry of delight. Let's get a divorce, she said. Okay. No, just kidding. She uttered a cry of delight. That's true. I never thought of it. The next day, she went to see her friend and told her trouble. Mrs. Forestier went to her dressing table, took up a large box, brought it to Mrs. Loisel, opened it, and said, choose, my dear. First, she saw some bracelets, then a pearl necklace, then a Venetian cross and gold and gems of exquisite workmanship. She tried the look of all the jewels in front of the mirror, hesitating, unable to make up her mind to leave them, to give them up. She kept on asking, haven't you anything else? Yes, look for yourself. I don't know what you would like best. Suddenly, she discovered in a black satin case a superb diamond necklace. Her heart began to beat covetously. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. She fastened it round her neck upon her high dress and stared in shocked wonder at the beautiful sight of herself. Then, with hesitation, she asked in anguish, "Could you lend me this? Just this alone?" "Yes, of course." And she flung herself around her friend, embraced her crazily, and went away with her treasure. Pause real quick. One, does this belong to anyone in here? Is the sweatshirt has a spider on it? So it's sitting in here? I wish it was Spider-Man. I don't know. So it turns out her friend can hook her up and says, "Yeah, I've got like piles of it." It's like a pirate when they have like the treasure chest. It's like, and then it opens up. She's like, "Pick anything you want." And she eventually finds beautiful jewelry thing, and she's like, "Bling, bling," and she's all super excited, and things are great. So now everything is perfect. There's no more issues the rest of the story.
No.
We're just now getting to the good stuff. Oh, this next part, we're going to find out how they actually get to the party, but find out how the party's actually going. Right. The day of the party arrived. Mrs. Loisel was a success. She was the prettiest woman present, elegant, graceful, smiling, and quite above herself with happiness. All the men stared at her, asked her name, wanted to be introduced to her. All the rich young bachelors were eager to waltz with her. Even the minister himself noticed her. She danced madly, enthusiastically, drunk with pleasure, with no thought for anything, in the triumph of her beauty, in the pride of her success, in a cloud of happiness, made up of this universal worship and admiration of the desires she had aroused, of the completeness of a victory so dear to her female heart. Really quick pause. So how'd the party go?
Good.
She's a super hottie. Everyone wanted to flirt with her, and she was like, "Shing diggity, I'm the best." She left about 4 o'clock in the morning. Since midnight, her husband had been sleeping in a deserted little room, in a company with 3 other dudes whose wives were having a good time. He threw over her shoulders the jackets he had brought for them to go home in. Modest, everyday clothes whose poverty clashed with the beauty of the ball dress. She was aware of this and was anxious to hurry away so that she should not be noticed by the other women putting on their costly furs. Mr. Loisel restrained her. "Now, wait a little bit. You'll catch cold out in the open. I'm going to go fetch a cab." But she did not listen to him and rapidly descended the staircase. When they were out in the street, they could not find a cab. They began to look for one, shouting at the drivers whom they saw passing in the distance. They walked down towards the river, desperate, shivering. At last, they found on the main avenue one of those old night prowling taxis, which is only to be seen in cities after dark, as though they were ashamed of their shabbiness in the daylight. It brought them to their door on Martyr Road, and sadly they walked up to their own apartment. It was the end for her. As for him, he was thinking that he must be at the office at 10 in the morning. She took off the garments in which she'd wrapped her shoulders so as to see herself in all of her glory before the mirror. But suddenly she uttered a cry. The necklace was no longer around her neck. "What's the matter with you?" asked her husband, already half undressed. She turned towards him in utter distress. I've no longer got Mrs. Forestier's necklace." He startled with astonishment. "What? Impossible!" They searched in the folds of her dress, in the folds of the coat, in the pockets, everywhere. They could not find it. "Are you sure you still had it on when you came away from the ball?" "Yes, I touched it in the hall at the ministry." "But if you lost it in the street, we should have heard it fall?" "Yes. Probably we should." "Did you take the number of the cab?" "No." "You didn't notice it, did you?" "No." They stared at one another, dumbfounded. At last, Mr. Loisel put on his clothes again. "I'll go over all the ground we walked, see if I can find it." And he went out. She remained in her evening clothes, lacking strength to get into bed, huddled on a chair, without the ability or power of thought. Her husband returned about 7 in the morning. Hiccup. He had found nothing. He went to the police station, to the newspapers to offer reward, to the cab companies, everywhere that a ray of hope sent him. She waited all day long in the same state of bewilderment at this fearful catastrophe. Mr. Loisel came home at night, his face lined and pale. He had discovered nothing. Okay, you must write to your friend, tell her that you've broken the clasp of her necklace, and we're going to get it fixed. That'll give us time to look around us. She wrote as he came up with the right words. Real quick, got home from party. What's our bad news? And of course, the good choice at this point, when you know you've lost your friend's necklace, is what should you do?
Lie.
So let's back up. What should you do? Not what is your natural teenage thing to do. That's the next question. So the next question is, what is your natural teenage choice to do? Yeah. That's where you guys like, what? There's 2 choices? I'm pretty sure there's only one choice. It's just lie. Yeah, no, there's actually 2 choices. Telling the truth and lying. I swear there are 2 choices here. And so when they say the clasp is broken, what's the clasp referring to?
The thing that connects it?
So the little thing on the back. He's like, so that's part of their lie. He's like, oh, we broke that. We're in the process of getting it fixed. That's why we haven't gotten it back to you yet.
Instead, we dropped it into a hobo.
By the end of a week, they had lost all hope. Mr. Loisel, who had aged 5 years, declared that line, in the end of a week, he'd aged 5 years. You know what that phrase means? Yeah, the fact that his week had been that bad that it felt like at the end of 1 week he was now 5 years older. Sometimes at the end of 5th period, I feel like I'm a year older just from that one class period. It's that same idea.
Is it really that bad?
Were you yelling?
Not every day. They get better. I just like to harass 5th period. It makes it better for that. Mr. Loisel, who had aged 5 years, declared, we must see about replacing the diamonds. The next day, they took the box which held the necklace and went to the jeweler's whose name was inside. He consulted his books. Yep, it was not I who sold the necklace, ma'am. I must have only supplied the clasp. They went from jeweler to jeweler, searching for another necklace like the first, consulting their memories, both ill with remorse and anguish of mind. In a shop at the upscale mall, they found a string of diamonds, which seemed to them exactly like the one they were looking for. It was worth $40,000. They were allowed to have it for $36,000. That's 10% off. That's a good deal. They begged the jeweler not to sell it for 3 days, and they arranged matters on the idea that if they found the old one, he would buy it back for $34,000 by the end of February. Mr. Loisel possessed $18,000 left to him by his father. He intended to borrow the rest. He did borrow it, getting $1,000 from one man, $500 from another, $5 here, $3 there. He gave promissory notes, entered into horrible agreements, did business with loan sharks and the whole tribe of evil moneylenders. He mortgaged the whole remaining years of his existence, risked his signature without even knowing if he could honor it, and, appalled at the agonizing face of the future, at the black misery about to fall upon him, at the prospect of every possible physical attack and moral torture, he went to get the new necklace and put down upon the jeweler's counter $36,000. When Mrs. Loisel took back the necklace to Mrs. Forestier, the latter said to her in a chilly voice, "You should have brought it back sooner. I might have needed it." She did not, as Mrs. Loisel feared, open the case. If she had noticed the substitution, what would she have thought? What would she have said? Would she not have taken her for a thief? Mrs. Loisel came to know the horrible life of being absolutely poor. She thought she was poor before. No. From the very first, she played her part heroically. This fearful debt must be paid off. She would pay it. The servant dismissed. They moved to a smaller apartment, even rented out a room in the small home for another man to live in. She came to know the heavy work of the house, the hateful duties of the kitchen. She washed the plates, wearing out her pink nails on the coarse pottery, the bottoms of pans. She washed the dirty linen, the shirts and dishcloths, hung them out to dry on a string. Every morning she took the dustbin down into the street, carried up the water, stopping on each landing to get her breath, and Clad like a poor woman, she went to the fruit market, to the grocer, to the butcher, a basket on her arm, haggling, insulted, fighting for every wretched penny of her money. Every month, bills had to be paid off, others renewed, time gained. Her husband worked in the evenings at putting straight a merchant's accounts, and often at night he did copying at 50 cents a page. This life lasted 10 full years. At the end of 10 years, everything was paid off. Everything. The loan shark's charges and the accumulation of superimposed interest on the money borrowed. Mrs. Loisel looked old now. She'd become like all the other strong, hard, coarse women of poor households. Her hair was badly done. Her skirts were awry. Her hands were red. She spoke in a shrill voice, and the water slopped all over the floor when she scrubbed it. But sometimes, when her husband was at the office, she sat down by the window and remembered that evening long ago of the ball at which she'd been so beautiful and so much admired. What would have happened if she'd never lost those jewels? Who knows? How strange life is, how fickle, how little is needed to ruin or save. One Sunday, as she'd gone for a walk along the riverbank to freshen herself after the labors of the week, she caught sight suddenly of a woman who was taking a child out for a walk. It was Mrs. Forestier, still young, still beautiful, still attractive. Mrs. Loisel was conscious of some emotion. Should she speak to her? Yes, certainly. And now that she had paid, she would tell her everything. Why not? She went up to her and said, "Good morning, Jean." The other did not recognize her and was surprised at being addressed by a poor woman. "But, ma'am, I don't know you. You must be making a mistake." "No, I am Matilda Loisel." Her friend uttered a cry. "My poor Matilda, how you've changed." "Yes, I've had some hard times since I saw you last, and many sorrows, and all because of you." "Because of me? How's that?" "You remember the diamond necklace you lent me for the ball of the ministry?" "Yes, well, I lost it." "How could you? Why, you brought it back." When we finished, "You brought another one just like it. For the last 10 years, we've been paying for it. You realize it wasn't easy for us. We had no money." "Well, it's paid for at last. I'm glad indeed." "Wait, you say you bought a diamond necklace to replace mine?" "Yes. You hadn't noticed it? They were very much alike." She smiled in proud and innocent happiness. Mrs. Forestier, deeply moved, took her two hands. "My poor Matilda, mine was fake. It was worth at the very most $500. That's where our story ends.